Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about some of the most pathetic legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, these legendary lords may not necessarily be the worst in the game, but they certainly aren't the greatest. And if you remove these legendary lords, nothing of value would actually be lost. Unfortunately, Tretch doesn't actually make this list because he certainly deserves it, but hey, he's at least Skaven, right? That's gotta count for something. Anyway, at number 5, we have Tsarina Katrin of Kislev. Imagine being the faction leader and a very powerful mage in the lore, and then getting Katrin in Warhammer 3. In fact, she's kind of been nerfed to a small degree with the Kislev rework. So in terms of faction effects, much of this is pretty pointless. In fact, there is a downside in having those minus 20 diplomatic relationship with the Orthodoxy. Makes it harder to confederate. It just shows you why Boris Ursus and Astanki are far better legendary lords than Kastaltin and Katrin. At least Kastaltin has a good skill line. Katrin doesn't even have that. She does have +3 hero recruit rank for Frost Maidens, though that's pretty pointless because, one, you don't necessarily want to recruit Frost Maidens in that way as opposed to using the low save character system. And even if you are recruiting Frost Maidens through the Ice Court system, it's not really that great of a benefit. Ice Court training cost minus 10%, not really that substantial. Plus 20 wins of magic power reserve capacity, it's really the only one that's worth talking about over here. In terms of her lord effects and special skill line, she gets minus 6 corruption, which doesn't matter in the context of Warhammer 3 campaigns, given the way corruption currently works. Maybe they change it, we'll see about that. Minus 25% upkeep for Ice Guard units. It used to be stronger, but since the Kislev rework, they kind of nerfed this, and it's pretty pointless to talk about minus 25% upkeep for a unit that you get later on in your campaign, especially given the fact that Kislev has a lot of money right now, and you don't even want to mask Ice Guard. Ice Guard are a situational hybrid unit that's useful in two ways. One, magical attacks. Two, slowing down units. There are better melee units, there are better ranged units. There's better units all around that you can get for Kislev. You do want some Ice Guard, if only for the slow, but getting an entire stack, not really that important. And unless you're doing that, it's not really worth talking about this kind of benefit. But really, the kicker over here for Katrin is that outside of the Ice Court sled, her entire special skill line is not that great. Her lore of magic, lore of ice, is inferior to Tempest magic. So a generic mage, Ice Witch Lord, or Frost Maiden has a better school of magic, and they can also get some pretty powerful effects as well, like reducing spell resistance by minus 10% for enemy armies, getting 20% wins a magic power reserve capacity, wins a magic cost plus minus 4%, or if we're looking at Frost Maiden heroes, one of the things to consider about the Frost Maiden hero, they can also get 10% cooldown to spells and have that Tempest magic. I mean, Katrin does have minus 10% wins of magic cost for spells, minus 25% cooldown to Lore of Ice spells, but this is not really going to incentivize you to use Lore of Ice with her. In fact, spending any skill point in Lore of Ice is just a waste of a skill point, except Frost Shield to a certain extent, but that's roughly about it. The only reason you would actually want to use magic with Katrin is to get the Crystal Cloak ability through her item, but that's really about it. Outside of that, like, she has a couple of melee skills, like Frost Affinity, which gives her speed, strider, and also campaign move range. That's useful. Armor, HP, all that, but her HP is not really that great to begin with. And even when you're putting her on the slide, she's not going to compare to any dedicated melee lord. The best thing you could probably say is that Katrin is either a skirmisher lord or a frostworm lord, but the frostworm is really doing a lot of the work over there. And shield device, this used to actually be better, but having 360 missile block and 15% missile block chance is pretty bonus for Kislev, considering the fact that you might not be dealing with a lot of range armies in a campaign unless they severely buff Norska. Unless you're in a different way, like if you literally leave Fraud to start massing range units, you deserve to lose a campaign in that situation. You shouldn't. So really, by the time this might become useful, it's useful in very specific situations. Immune to flanking, okay, fair enough, but Con Queen is far inferior to Con King that Boris Ursus has. Everything that Katrin can do, Boris can do better. Better faction effects, better Lord skill line, better better Lord effects. Boris is better. Astankia is better. Kastalton is better. There's literally no reason whatsoever to ever play a campaign as Catherine. She has got the worst dynamic of a Kislev campaign, the worst skill line, the worst faction effects, and even the worst starting city. Yes, starting with literally no settlement is not really that different than starting with Kislev. Kislev can be useful in a very limited way in a campaign, but it's not really that great. Erengrad and Prague are great cities, not Kislev. So that's Catherine in a nutshell. Pretty damn useless. At number 4, we have Luffer Harkon of the Vampire Coast. Now, the Vampire Coast is a pretty pathetic race to begin with, but Luffer Harkon is not really in a great situation. He does get melee defense for lords and embedded heroes. Yay, that's great. Anything else? Lizardmen hate you, so you're gonna have to fight Lizardmen. At least you're not too terrible against Lizardmen, though Lustria may not necessarily be the best playground for the Vampire Coast. The real problem when you're playing Luffer Harkon's campaign, when you're looking at things, you gotta restore his mind. And restoring his mind, well, requires you to hold on to his initial settlement in order to get the settlement to tier 5, while also suffering pretty severe penalties for 12 turns. So this is not even just, well, suffering penalties in terms of magic and spell resistance. If we look at his skill line, he is actually lacking magic until he completes that. So he can be much better later on, but by the time he gets that, that's, you know, a campaign is pretty much over. By the way, getting a settlement to tier 5 to unlock something that really should be a 20-turn situation at most is not great. He does get a bunch of skills, but he's lacking in magic. He kind of makes up for this by having an extra hero capacity for Vampire Fleet Captains, but he's going to need that Vampire Fleet Captain in his own army to make up for the lack of magic. He does get some leadership, like some of these effects are really useful, and he can be very strong if you complete that ritual, but lacking magic for a good amount of time in a campaign, having to deal with Lustria, even having to go potentially inland into Lustria to really make this campaign work, it's not going to be a great campaign dynamic. Say what you will about old other Vampire Coast Legendary Lords, at least they've played that coast campaign, you know, naval warfare. Luffer is like, we'll go inland. Even though it's the worst possible decision you can make from an economic perspective as the Vampire Coast, this campaign actually forces you to do so. So that's great. Also, it's a campaign in Lustria, so bonus points for being particularly awful as a result of that. I mean, Lustria is just not the great area of the campaign map, but it's especially bad for Coast, who want to focus on those coastal settlements because their economy inland is just really bad. They want those ports. I mean, the fact that Norska outdoes them in an economy as it is pretty damn bad for the Vampire Coast. I wonder how things are going to look after Tides of Torment. At number 3, we have Lord Mazdundi of the Lizardmen. So, Lizardmen in general, not in a great state as a race, but Mazdundi might as well not be a legendary lord. In fact, it might just be better if he was a legendary hero like Lord Croak. Lord Croak could very well be a legendary lord, because he's certainly better than most legendary lords in the game in a lot of different ways. Not many people are a walking, talking nuke. But seriously, Mazdundi is so pathetic that you can't even consider him a faction. Like 50% construction cost for one building that you don't really care too much about, minus 30% right cost, which given the cooldown of rights doesn't really matter that much. And besides, one of them is free, another one's very cheap, one of them is expensive, but it has a 50-turn cooldown. So yeah, it could be useful once in an entire campaign. And then you look at his situation, he does get targeting range for spells, unit experience, upkeep for Temple Guard, Misguised Base Chance. Problem with Temple Guard is, by the time you get him, your campaign is over. It is a pretty sizable benefit. Sure, I'll give him that. Wins a magic power reserve capacity plus 15, yeah, that's very outdated. And then he doesn't even have a special skill line. He gets a couple of wins of magic benefits. Lord Croak is better. He gets miscast base chance, barrier points, terror, regeneration. Like, seriously, the regeneration is the only thing that's actually useful. His entire wins of magic skill line is not really that great. I mean, Ruination of Cities is okay, so is Banishment, but a lot of the actual spells he has in his magical skill line are just not anything special. So he doesn't really feel like a great caster. He is actually better in melee on a mount due to that regeneration. Seriously, the best thing you can do in Mazdundi is give him the Sword of Cain and use someone else for casting. Like, I don't know, get Lord Croak in his army. Or put Lord Croak in a generic Saurus army, because having a Saurus All Blood might genuinely be better to lead an army with Lord Croak than Mazdundi. Partly because you do get a 20% upkeep for Saurus, which is pretty substantial for the campaign when the campaign really does matter. Besides, Carnosaurus, pretty damn strong. That's kind of Mazdundi in a nutshell. Anything he can do, others can do better. So, yeah, he might as well not exist. Really a shame. I mean, I'm pretty miffed about Mazdundi and Katrin. You look at Katrin, she stopped Grimgor. Grimgor, who literally forced the Dwarf Slayers to run away in Karakadrin. Just to understand why Grimgor is a badass in lore, because he did that. And Katrin stopped him. And Mazdundi, this guy reshapes continents with his minds. Like the mountain ranges around him, he built them himself. And what we get, the Pepe the Frog legendary lord, who might as well not be a legendary lord. Slan are so disappointing, except Croak. Though it's saying a lot that a dead Slan is better than the live ones. At number 2, we have the Fey Enchantress, in keeping with the theme of having terrible caster lords and might as well be legendary heroes at most. She certainly fits that bill. People can meme all they want about Albric. Albric at least has a good skill line, good faction effects. He's a meme, but he can actually be good. The Fey Enchantress, if we look at her, she gets Blessing of the Lady. That's really good, great, right? Right? She causes fear. Fantastic. And she gains 4 chivalry per turn. Really fantastic stuff. Oh, she gets a minus 25% construction cost in construction time for warship buildings. If it was for buildings in general or provincial capitals, yeah, that would be a pretty powerful benefit, but it is just one specific building type. Not really that great. She gets control and growth in all provinces when Bretonia has some of the highest growth and control in the entire game, so another pointless benefit. The only thing that she has over here that's actually useful is ward save for prophetess lords and embedded damsel heroes. That's about it. Yes, Grail Knights and Grail Guardians have melee attack, melee defense, recruit rank, all well and good. Though, you know, that same situation does apply where it's like by the time you get them, campaign is kind of over. Her campaign dynamic is not great. She also starts with no vows on lock. So that's really a fun little situation, having to work your way through the entirety of the vow system, which does hurt quite a bit in a Bretonian campaign because of the upkeep situation. And then, all the issues that you may have with using her as a lord, that's one thing, but her faction effects, talk about being as close to pointless as you could imagine in a campaign. Plus 5 peasant economy, it's useful in the first 6-10 turns of the campaign at most. After that, you may have so many peasants or economy so strong that you don't care about it. Plus 15 casualty replenishment is nothing to joke about, but here's the problem with that. For many other races in the game, this would be a fantastic benefit if it was coupled with many other faction effects. But just having it on its own, it's not especially fantastic. I wish I had it with Nakari, don't get me wrong on that, but here's the problem. Unlike some other races, Bretonia can get easy access to casualty replenishment heroes, or relatively easy access. Like, they do have that high growth for main settlements, like starting at 20 growth, going to 40, 60, 80, all that. So Bretonia can get that high growth, though they're limited because of the design of Bretonian settlements. But then you have damsels, who, guess what damsels do? Damsels provide casualty replenishment. It's not stated over here, but damsels are a casualty replenishment hero who increase capacity at tier 3. You gain them at tier 3, increase capacity, so having 15% extra casualty replenishment when you can get so many damsels in a Bretonnian campaign is a bit irrelevant. There is a casualty replenishment cap in the game, just worth pointing out. So it's not really a great benefit. Can help you out sometimes, but just basically a non-entity as a faction. Not the most pointless, but she's certainly running. She's certainly in the running for the prize of being one of the most pointless legendary lords in the entire game. She's not even that great of a caster when you think about it. Like, caster-wise, you want lords that have some very, very powerful effects. I mean, she does get a hero recruit rank for damsels, so she's more useful to confederate than she is to play. Actually, there's almost no reason to play her. Or Lewin. That's a different discussion. But Lewin is at least very damn strong in battle. She's not really that strong in battle in a Bretonnian campaign. And finally, and number 1, it is, of course, Daniel, the Demon Prince. Creative Assembly named him Daniel in one of the marketing videos that they did for Warhammer 3. Just goes to show how Warhammer 3 marketing used to be at one point. But the Demon Prince, just not really a great campaign in any way, shape, or form. You're missing a research tree because you have this whole glory system which does not make up for missing a research tree. A research tree can give you some very specific and focused benefits. You get all kinds of benefits, and many of these benefits like, oh, get a bunch of benefits when fighting against demons, when demons are not really the biggest problem in this campaign. You can't even use regular items, and yes, you can use those body parts, but guess what? Those body parts still don't make him as good as a generic lord, a generic demon prince that Warriors of Chaos can get access to undivided or focused on a specific god. It's not going to be as good as an either undivided or dedicated demon prince for one of the specific gods of chaos that can use items. So the entire design, missing a research tree, having units from all kinds of factions put together in one but without real balance or good design. There's some obviously good stuff over here, don't get me wrong on that, like, Chaos Warriors of Khorne are Chaos Warriors of Khorne, Chaos Warriors of Khorne with halberds and all that, but why would you play this campaign? Like, if you want undivided units, Warriors of Chaos under Be'lakor are much better. If you want dedicated units, Khorne is better, Nurgle is better. Even Tzeentch is better to play than this guy. It says a lot about this campaign. Like, you might think this is a toy box campaign, but it's really a crappy toy box. If my parents had bought me a toy box like this, I would have been pissed as a kid. I understand the intent, but it's such a huge disappointment, and it's like the most pointless campaign and worthless campaign, and easily one of the worst campaigns EA ever designed. And when you think about how good the prologue was for Yuri, yeah, I really wonder what CA was thinking about with respect to this character design and what they were designing with this campaign. I have no clue. Costin, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.